So this is your weekly Twitter space, Judge. And I know you're busy. So today I put as far as topic of conversation, Tuskegee Airmen, because I remember last week someone wanted information on the Tuskegee Airmen program. And I said that we'll talk about it this week. Also affirmative action. And that is because I came across a New York Times article about the Supreme Court. They're going to be ruling on affirmative action, I believe, next month sometime. So I want to bring up that article. And I also put Satan Club. And that I just came across this article in the New York Post. Pennsylvania School District must allow after school Satan Club, Judge ruled. I want to touch on that a little bit. And AI, we on Twitter Space. AI is the new thing, but some people are saying it could be a danger to society if we're, dependent on AI too much. So I want to touch on that as well. And of course, the number one priority here is to promote you running for mayor of Memphis, Tennessee. And you guys can donate to the judge, $ Judge Joe Brown 2023 on Cash App. Go to the website, jjb2023.com, and sign up. And yeah, so where do you want to start today? Affirmative
Well,
action, Tuskegee, Satan Club, AI.
let's start with affirmative action. That is the easiest, but the hardest. That came out of something that was in the California state constitution, which is interesting because affirmative action has been destroyed as a result of the collaboration of some students in California with an administration in California, and the California Constitution was never mentioned in the entire process. That's Baki. The California Constitution, which was passed and ratified in 1851, this is before the Civil War when slavery was still legal. This was after the gold rush started. It said that they were creating two institutions of education for the excellence of the state. The state college system, now known as the state university system, and what is distinctively known as the University of California. One was supposed to be exclusively academic, and the University of California was to be devoted to leadership, specifically leadership under the state constitution. And that amounted to leadership in economics, industry, sciences, you name it, and business, and also in the various communities. Specifically, the Constitution says something like our colored brethren so recently escaped from slavery, and so many of their relatives still confined to the horrible aspects of the institution of slavery. And it says our Chinese brethren so dominated by evil tongs, and our Mexican brethren dominated by gangs, etc., etc. It
Mhm.
says that for these communities to advance, they must have access to the latest and most advanced educational opportunities so that they can develop effective leadership for their communities. All right, that said, what we students in California had come up with was a scheme where we took what had been used for the benefit of athletes when it came to admissions. It said in the catalog, and had for years, admission shall be based on a competitive assessment of grade point average, aptitude test, and slash or other factors that indicate an ability to succeed. Well, they had historically been using athletics for that other factors. So we said, well, we have needs commensurate with the Constitution, and quote, in fact, it was my idea, we came up with this, we don't want the leadership in our communities to be dominated by the gangster, the thug, etc., the drug dealer, etc., etc. We need effective leadership in our communities so there can be public peace, dignity, and safety. That said, we wish to advise you that we are demanding that these provisions not just be used for athletes, but also for members of the various minority communities in the state. And we listed them as they were in the state constitution. We got that in place. It started working well, and we started getting more admissions for freshmen and for third-year students who, under the California scheme, could transfer into the University of California if they had a C+ average for 2 years and got an associate degree. They could transfer all of the credits to the University of California and then proceed for another 2 years and get a bachelor's degree. So we started being successful. That expanded into the law school, the dental schools, and the medical schools. At this point in the Bay Area, some black wannabe wannabe medical students cooked up a scheme with certain individuals, Bakke being one of them, in the administration up at Berkeley, to get rid of affirmative action because they said there was a political component. We black students said typical white faculty did not have the expertise and the experience to properly assess other factors that indicated an ability to succeed. And after some things we did, the faculty, so to speak, conceded that issue to us, and that was for the Hispanics, who called themselves Chicanos at the time, and the Asians and the Native Americans. So we happily went about getting students in, and it was working. Well, these wannabe medical students said it was a political test because it was a political test. It was a test to see if your admission would maximize fallout positively to your communities. And in fact, those who went in for the most part, those who came in for the most part, it did. But they wanted to get in, and they said they should be assessed on the basis of just the highest scoring blacks grade point average and aptitude test, even if what they got did not come up to the ordinary standards that limited themselves just to that, and especially not have to be subject to the ordinary standards which were applied across the board, irrespective of race, just usually for the benefit of athletes, to this issue of other factors that indicated an ability to succeed. So the faculty let them in on this basis. They got in. And the agreement was it was a setup to challenge what had been an effective affirmative action program. So when it came time for the university to supposedly defend itself, it did not use the Constitution, totally ignored it, and tried to defend on fairness to downtrodden people without a consideration as to whether the admittees under the standard that they would be using would actually do anything for the so-called downtrodden group. It didn't. And that's how we got on this national thing of an attack on affirmative action. But essentially, what affirmative action is understanding that with the circumstances being as they are, there are deficits in the admission criteria when it comes to access to universities and colleges. The university and college produces leadership, and that is something that people should consider. Your daughter, 17, 18 years old, is not paying attention to the gas gauge, and she's about to run out of gas she's on the freeway and she wants to get off to get gas. Well, when she gets off, is the leadership in the area where she finds herself going to be people who are positive and about something, or are they going to be gangsters, thugs, drug dealers, rapists, and everything else out in the hood or barrio or someplace else? And it's dangerous for her to be where she needs to be to get the gas. And that's the question. So moving on with that, we have Clarence Thomas that got where he is because he took advantage of affirmative action. And when he got in and had some problems with his academic career, he got redeemed at Yale Law School because he went around attacking affirmative action. That's he wound up on the U.S. Supreme Court because of that. I guess that's this Conjay Jackson we've got in here. The next black person got in because she's a shill, it seems like, for, the trans community. Mm-hmm. She didn't know what a woman was. I guess that's supposed to say it's so fluid that you can't determine that. But hell, she could have said she was a woman. I won't even go there anymore. But I think that deals with affirmative action, and it's coming back up.
Right, it's coming back up because you have, I think it started with a group of Asian students out of Harvard that took it, I think, to the state and federal. Now it's at the Supreme Court. So the reason why I'm bringing it up, because yes, the Supreme Court will be ruling on affirmative action soon. And the New York Times posted this article the other day. It says, the hard question of affirmative action and slavery is, if there were an affirmative action program for descendants of enslaved people, would you consider that to be race-based, right? Let me just read this first paragraph. And guys, if you want to start requesting to come up to talk about affirmative action, please do so now. During oral arguments for the biggest Supreme Court cases, the justices' questions are often meant to advance their own view of the case. Conservative justices ask friendly questions of lawyers on the conservative side and borrow into logical weaknesses of liberal side. The 5 hours of oral arguments on 2 affirmative action cases in October mostly fit this pattern. But about 3 hours into a session, Justice Brett Kavanaugh asked a less typical question. It involved slavery, and it was raised an inconvenient issue from Kavanaugh's fellow conservative. Quote, so today, a benefit of descendants of slaves would not be race-based, correct? Kavanaugh asked to Cameron Norris, a lawyer arguing for the end of race-based affirmative action. Norris seemed caught off guard. I think that's incorrect, to Justice Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh did note that, Judge, please mute, because I'm hearing everything you're doing.
I'm not doing anything.
I hear you drinking. I just hear
I'm
you
not
moving around.
drinking.
Just mute. Just mute.
I've been hearing all this noise in the background. I don't know what it is.
Kavanaugh then noted that Norris had already acknowledged that the post-Civil War benefits that formerly enslaved people received from the federal government were not race-based. Those benefits were based on their status as being enslaved, not their skin color. If that's correct, then the benefit of descendants of former slaves is also not race-based. You can make other arguments if you want about that, but it does not seem to be race-based. So with affirmative action, I guess he's basically saying that it's not race based because it wasn't, because it's, if it's about going back to slavery, it's whoever was enslaved, not by your skin color. So the conversation
Well,
quickly
that's what we had. It went well. I know the black law students at UCLA and the rest of the undergrad students at UCLA. That was our position. It was not race based. What it was just taking the ordinary admissions criteria, which in the catalog for years it said a competitive assessment, a grade point average, aptitude test, and or other factors that indicated an ability to succeed. So all we said was those factors should be considered for regular, not affirmative action admissions.
right.
That's what we said. These clowns, what is that in the background? Somebody's yelling.
No,
Oh, anyway.
that's I'm sorry, that's my father in the background to tell him I'm
Oh,
doing the show. So
oh,
anyway,
okay.
right. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
here, so what we did was we want regular admissions with the concept standing in for affirmative actions. But the idiots wanted what is now defined as affirmative actions. And because of these selfish Negroes, that's how we got locked into that definition. Affirmative action, the way we defined it and had for quite a few years successfully at UCLA, was action that affirmative applied, normalized across the board, uniform admissions to everybody.
Right.
That's what we had. So right
Mhm.
now, when you do that, you see you have a basis that holds people down. For example, right now in California, they have advanced placement classes at a lot of high schools, but they don't have all high schools offering advanced placement classes or even what they call advanced placement tracks. Now, the way it works for the University of California is if you get an ordinary high school course and it's an A, you get a 4.0. If it's a B, 3.0, C, 2.0, D, 1.0. All right. If you get an advanced placement class, which is deemed to be on a college level, a B is a 5.0 and an A is a 6.0. So you get an enhanced grade consideration. If you're in an advanced placement track, what happens is you get an additional whole point added to your GPA. So you can get a student at not an advantageous high school who gets straight A's. He only gets a 4.0, but you get other people who are in schools like, say, Beverly Hills High School versus uh, uh, Jordan High School, which is on 103rd Street, which used to be known as Watts way back when before it got expanded as a term. And there are very few, or at least there weren't very many advanced placement classes uh, there. So somebody with a straight A average at Jordan High School might be able to get a 4.2. But you get Beverly Hills High School, where they had an advanced placement track and many, many advanced placement courses. Someone could get over a 5.34 or a 5.4 GPA, and he might have had some B's in there as well, or he might get a 5.2 and they don't make any distinction. And this kid is granted an admissions preference over somebody who at an inner city high school gets a 4.0 straight A average, but doesn't have any advanced placement courses. So
Uh,
that
mhm.
becomes reverse discrimination of the sort that they claim affirmative action is. So the whole thing's screwed because the national dialogue has been skewed by some initially selfish interest in the matter.
All right, look, one more thing I want to read, then I want to go to Mary, the speaker. Um, it says in this article, they give an example, the legacy of UNC. So Kavanaugh's question about slavery was jarring because the overlap was complete. An admissions policy based on a family's history of enslavement certainly sounds like a race-based policy without being one on paper. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson pointed out another example during oral arguments. For a long time, universities, including public schools like the University of North Carolina, refused to enroll Black students. Jackson compared a hypothetical applicant who would be a
Hypothetical.
hypothetical applicant who would be a fifth generation UNC student and thus receive the so called legacy boost with an applicant whose family had lived in the state just as long, but whose ancestors have been barred from attending. As Jackson asked, shouldn't the second applicant receive a boost too?
Well, here, that's still a flawed argument, and I expect that kind of flawed argument of perspective from her because, first off, see, the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery and involuntary servitude. Obama's ancestor, Bush's ancestor, George Herbert Walker, Bush's ancestor, George Walker Bush, and Dick Cheney's ancestor, Warren Buffett's ancestor, was a person subject to involuntary servitude. And that, see, is not race-based, it's status-based because, first off, the Constitution of the United States and its amendments, nowhere in them mentions race at all. It's condition of servitude or enslavement. And it is technical that other people were in a condition of slavery besides Black folks. So when Kavanaugh brings that up, it does, in fact, indicate a status that is race neutral because it was not confined to Black people. Although a lot of individuals have the misconception that it was almost universally Black, but not exclusively. The thing is that we forget these kinds of realities. And let's see, what is this person's name, by the way?
Who?
I'm talking about the Sam Hinckley. That's his name. Sam Hinckley is ancestor to President George Herbert Walker Bush, George Walker Bush, Barack Obama, Dick Cheney, vice president, and also 4 other American presidents. And he was in that category of slave or involuntary service. So he was actually a French Huguenot who was basically a Protestant, tried to get away from the Catholics in France during a flare up of religious hatred. So he sold himself into servitude.
All right.
Now, so it's not all Black. So when you talk about slavery being a basis for it, by its definition, it is not race-based. It's neutral based on status. And that's what we did. So there would be no reverse discrimination, is we based it on economic, social, and educational status rather than on race.
Right, which means that's fine, and I'm gonna go to Marianne. But the fact is that when you look at who is affected the most, socioeconomically, are Black people. Let me go to Marianne.
Yeah, but we got to get away from thinking of it when you start talking about
no, I'm just
law.
saying if it's
Yeah.
if it's about economics, then majority of people who affirmative action would benefit would be Black people, and then
No, it wouldn't.
All right. Let me go to the speaker. Let me go to the speaker.
No, we will, but one second. The majority of the people that are getting public assistance in the United States are white.
Are they applying for universities? Because then you'd have
that,
to
look. If it's economic,
if it's economic, then it's okay. Wait. Give me a second. If it's economic, then when we're talking about black people, because you look at the numbers, black people are at the
They are,
bottom.
I
But then
know
on
they're,
top of that, wait a minute. And then on top of that, when you do, at one point, you did have universities practicing having prejudice practices, not admitting black people who even qualify. But I need
that's
to go to
not
the. I want to
what,
go to the speaker.
I
Like,
know,
let's.
no, no, hold on. That's not what I'm talking about. You have to get this clear. I'm talking about if you want an effective strategy to take it on and beat it, what they're doing, you have to start thinking in the right terms. There's a thing in law that if you can't get through the front door, sometimes you can get through the back door. And this is one of them. As long as we keep focusing on race for this kind of issue, we get stuck in a trap. What I'm saying is that you have to understand that you win when you make it race neutral. If you
All right.
make it based on race, you'll lose. Now,
Okay.
that's the point.
Let's bring in the speaker, Mary. Hi.
Good afternoon to you, Dana, and good afternoon to you, Judge. Um, I have I'm in agreement with some of what you said, but I'm in great disagreement with a lot of what you said. As
It doesn't make any difference if you disagree. I'm talking about how the law works.
Judge, why are
You
you
see,
getting
when we
upset?
start,
May
no,
I speak,
no,
please?
because it's, no, I'm the law professor. I've been doing this for 50 years. And it's the same thing you're saying that gives first year law students a lot of grief. So I'm cutting you off because you're based on your emotions and your reaction to what you don't like. You don't have to like it in the law. You need to know how to manipulate the law if you want to get somewhere. Now, tell us what you don't like. Go right ahead. I'm saying it doesn't make any difference because that's not what we're talking about. Go ahead.
Okay, if I'm given the chance to.
Go right ahead.
Um, and I'm not emotional. Um, number
Well, go
one.
ahead.
As far as the law goes, I was not arguing with you on that point. I'm in great agreement with a lot of what you were saying about the law. As far as historically, and because they kind of interchange into two, but you were correct on that as far as the aspect of the law. But when that's kind of dangerous to say that everybody was enslaved. No, people had in servitude or indentured voluntarily, and sometimes they, if they did a crime or whatever, they were, went to work off their years. What we went through was not involuntary. That was thrust and forced upon our ancestry, and that's why it's a unique perspective as far as that part goes.
And that's why it always loses because it turns out to be race based. I'm trying to tell you if you want success in doing something about restoring the advantages of what incorrectly got turned affirmative action, then I'm telling you how to do it where it works. What you're talking about does not work because it essentially works out race based. Now, that's what I'm talking about. I understand your position about somebody being victimized, but oftentimes the victim cannot be considered a victim in the law that way without losing the case. Now, that's all I'm doing.
I
But
understand,
you
Judge.
are insistent. Go ahead.
No,
Now,
no,
go
I
ahead.
understand perfectly what you are saying. But I'm just saying, as far as um, we have to understand that unfortunately, yes, we have our laws, but we have to also understand that there's institutionalized racism, white supremacy, and other groups are allowed certain things that we have died and fought for. And our ancestors been on this land. Some were brought here through chattel slavery. Okay, having said that, that these laws, how they use it and twist it, like you were saying about the the um the Asians actually who um, was up there talking about the civil rights bill and things of that nature. Every other group is coming as their group in their ethnicity, and they are getting things done on their behalf using the template that we laid out and that we are the ones who forced change in this country with blood, sweat, and tears. And yes, there were other people that are helping to a certain degree, but they had certain hidden agendas. Um, if it was not from us, many people would not be allowed these freedoms and liberties and tangibles and things of that nature that we are denied right now today. And I do understand that you are saying that when you're dealing to with legalities to a certain degree, you can't deal with race, but race is all throughout the history. And I beg to differ when you say race is not in the Constitution, because we're still three-fifths of a human being. As far as what is written in there, they have not even taken that out. And we don't even have a standing precedent who is currently who denies us reparations.
Excuse me. The Constitution does not say we are 3/5
Or
of a
one-fifth
person.
or
What
something.
it says, no, what it says is this. Every 10 years, this is Article 1. It says every 10 years there shall be a census, the primary purpose of which is determining representation in the House of Representatives. For purposes of apportionment, 3/5 of all those held in slavery or involuntary servitude shall be counted toward that number. It doesn't say black. It's just the same thing that went on with this last census, where nobody was allowed to inquire whether or not the person being counted was a citizen. That is not to get people who vote. That is to get California, New York, and Illinois the opportunity to count people who can't vote, just like the slaves and involuntary servants could not, but get counted toward determining and apportioning representation, so California, Illinois, and New York don't lose people in the House of Representatives. That's what that purpose is. It's still being done today by the Democratic Party, who insisted that we not be able to ask whether or not a person's a citizen. This is the fifth census I participated in as an adult. This one in 2020, by the way, and it is the only one where I was not asked my citizenship status or the status of my parents relative to that. Now, that's word up. That's reality, historic. Now, I'm not arguing with you on this other stuff. I agree with you that Black people and others who find themselves in unfortunate circumstances get mistreated in this country. I'm only saying that for a legal perspective, asking somebody who, in other words, lions eat people. And when lions eat people, you have to go deal with the lions. You have to hold the lions off. You get your spears out and you do it. You don't hope somehow or another the lion will lose his taste for meat, and that's how you get off the hook. It doesn't work that way. So we've got a several hundred-year history with oppression. There is no reason to expect that the habits of several hundred years, several centuries are going to suddenly evaporate and the lion is going to lose its taste for meat or the racist is going to lose his taste for racism. That's all I'm saying. We got to get away from thinking of stuff like that because it's a trap. It will not work.
I agree on the legality part of it. I do agree.
Well, we all understand the emotive part of it, but the emotive part is like, oh, please, man, I don't taste good, man. I'm all hot, funky, and sweaty. I'm putting dirt on me. I'll go crunch when you chew on me besides the bones that you might like. I got dirt, man. I just rolled in the mud.
Anybody else want to request to come up to speak on affirmative action? Please do so, because we're gonna move on to another topic. And I kind of, I don't want to have someone an hour later swing back to affirmative action if we're on another topic. But sometimes people come in at later time, so which is fine. But I'm just saying, if you want to request, please request, and I'll bring you right up. Real quick, it says in this same article, and I think this is something we should follow. One example would be admission policy that gave extra consideration to students who grew up in a family with a net worth of less than 30,000. Most Black households fall into that category. Only a small share of white households do. There are even greater racial disparities in measures based on neighborhood wealth. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, Judge, as far as, affirmative action, winning the case against affirmative action or what have you, and don't be stuck on race. But the criteria that they're using from affirmative action that's not race based just so happens to it just so happens Black households fall under those category more than any other group because of the socioeconomic status.
Well, run with it. Don't say it. In other words, we always have to go make what we are conspicuous in the wrong kind of way. In other words, if nobody's asking you and there's another way to deal with it, do so.
I
That's
see what you're
like,
saying. So making an argument for something, you don't always want to lead with race. You could lead without using race.
yes,
That's still going to benefit your group of people.
yes.
Okay. I want
Now,
to go to.
well, I'll give you
Oh,
another one
all right.
example.
When you're
Oh,
finished,
hold
I'm
on,
gonna
hold
go
on,
to
hold
Black
on.
Authority, then Adam. Go ahead.
Okay, one classic example.
Black majority. I'm sorry.
Everybody on here ought to understand this example. You're 20 years old and you want to buy a beer, but you might be able to get away with 21. Do you lead with I'm 20? And the sign says you got to be born before this date and be 21? No, you just go in and you just walk in and deal with it without throwing out that little inconvenience. You're underage.
I think you're pushing that Black people just need to reprogram their thinking. You could win a lot that's going to benefit your group of people if you stop focusing on the race.
Yeah.
Black majority, and then Adam.
Okay. Hello, Miss Dana. Hello, Judge Joe Brown. Ketanji Brown, I believe Jackson is kind of have elevated this 14th Amendment, and she kind of made it very clear that these race-based affirmative action policies are really specific to our lineage. And recently, I just saw a post where Brett Kavanaugh is questioning this. I guess it's the Asian attorney in this case, and he's making the point that enslavement was not therefore race. It's not a race-based issue when it comes to this particular policy, which is interesting. But it looks like, and because I've questioned this multiple times, that they're setting it up for the lineage to, yes, be specific to a certain group of people, but that it's not going to be race-based. And it does ultimately open the door for those who have assimilated into whiteness. Most people don't really understand how these people think and how they operate and how they work. And so I know that there's a qualifier in our reparations movement that kind of does lean towards race. I just want to understand your perspective on all of these assimilated people that keep showing up on this PBS genealogy program, finding your roots. If you could speak to that.
If you get a sufficiently sophisticated DNA test, it will tell you a lot about your ancestry, where you came from going back. Oh, they had one that could go back 28,000 years and hook people up based on being that far apart. But the thing that is important about this is, again, categories. If you're Black, you may go straight Black. You may actually know the names of the people all the way back to somebody who got brought over here as a slave. A classic example is a family friend, Alex Haley. He traced back to his 10th generation ancestor, Kunta Kinte. He left out quite a few thousand other people, but he traced them back. So he knew these things. Now, let's say that Alex Haley's family has been receiving the benefits of the residuals and everything else on Roots and from the continuing sales of the autobiography of Malcolm X. And the family has several $1 million and students that come out of the family are from a background where there's education. Hell, Alex Haley's grandfather was a physician. So these people that you're talking about have access to the educated mind, access to the thought of study, access to the way of thinking that's critical and analytical, and a good family background that's known. Now, if they have found themselves in an upper class situation and economically, educationally, and background wise, what is the need for affirmative action for somebody like that? You see, if your father's a doctor and your mother's a lawyer, what do we get right there? Dr. Cosby and the series he had. And you go to Beverly Hills High School because that's where you live. Exactly what deprivation did you suffer educationally that would prevent you from getting in the front door at UCLA, Berkeley, UC Irvine, or UC Santa Barbara? Now, what we found was when we were doing the student evaluations 55 years ago, 50 years ago, that certain students who were Black said, well, you know, I spent my time doing frat parties, you know, and so, but I'm Black, so I need to be considered that way. No, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You didn't buckle down. You were a frat guy. A lot of us in here are on the same frat you're in, but we studied. You didn't. You're one of those who went to all the parties and got drunk and tried to play. So why should you get in here when you've demonstrated not a proclivity to work hard at something, but to party too damn much? That doesn't look like it's going to have a positive fallout to too many of us. Meanwhile, what makes you special, since your daddy is a doctor and your mama's a lawyer, what disadvantage did you suffer in this? And you went to LA High School, or let's say you went to, Palos Verdes High School. Exactly what disadvantages did you suffer? So you see, if you can't put any disadvantages out there, you're relying on your race, Black, to create a circumstance that is not real, because any downside under these conditions that you're talking about, you brought on yourself. Now, there is the difference, but it's technical.
Black majority. I know if you had anything else to say, I want to go to Adam. And
Yeah, could I do a quick follow up, because I wasn't really talking about the Black people from the lineage. I'm actually talking about the poor whites in Appalachia, Kentucky, West Virginia, etc., that would be able to say, I have a lineage connected to these people. I'm living in a trailer. I've been poor my whole life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the people that I'm speaking about that could have this lineage. And I think that's where the Supreme Court justice is operating from at this point, is how I'm thinking about it.
Well, that's not a bad point. And it bespeaks a bigger issue. If you live in the People's Republic of China and you have the ability, I don't care where you're from, what your background is, you're going to be included in that cadre who has provided all of the education that you can get. Otherwise, you're going to be working up to your knees in human shit in a rice paddy. So you have an incentive to be educated. The Russians are doing the same thing. Meanwhile, we've got all of these excuses to keep from educating everyone as far as they can be educated, and making it generally so expensive that they're in hock for the first 10 to 12 years after they get out of getting this expensive education that they can't do anything with. because we don't teach common sense or encourage it. Now, see, that's the bigger issue. So what you say is exactly right. If you get to a race neutral thing, then you include these people from Appalachia in the trailer parks. I mean, look at Joe Biden. He's urban trailer park trash. Look where he got, president of the United States. Look at Bill Clinton. He was trailer park trash, literally down in outside of Hot Springs, Arkansas. But he got to be president. Now, the crucial thing is you could consider the economic circumstances, and actually, you know what? They did. That's how he got in position a lot of times to get the education and become a Rhodes Scholar that got him where he is. So, yeah, but it has to be fair, straight across the board. So you can't have it. See, this is where you get through the back door. If you give it to somebody who is in an urban trailer park or from Appalachia in the hill countries because he's white, or he doesn't get cut off from it because he's white, then you have an argument saying you can't cut somebody in a similar circumstance off from these opportunities because he's black. See how you turned it around? That's how you get back to it.
All right, Adam.
Hey, good afternoon, Dana. Judge Joe Brown, always an honor, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. I guess you're trying to. You were saying that it should be economic based. So, like, if let's say a black kid, a white kid, whatever you want to call people, both live in a trailer park, and both abusive parents or no dad or drunken mom that's whoring around or whatever, and they're able to pull their grades together, that they should get some sort of affirmative action regardless of their race. And that would help all people, right? And including black. That sounds reasonable to me. Rather than discriminatory, you're talking about equality rather than equity, correct?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. That's sounds like
that was it, Adam.
Well, everybody else, Black hit up some of the things I was gonna say, and Judge hit up some of the things I was gonna say. But definitely, I agree with that. That's a good way to look at it. Less divisive. I'll land my plane.
All right, speaker, stay right there. So a couple of
Don't judge him, Joe Brown.